My name is Garrett Moore. I'm 38 years old, and tonight my name wasn't even on the seating chart. The woman at the check-in table looked confused when I gave it to her. She double-checked her list, then said, "Are you sure you're at the right event? Not unkind, just unconvinced?" I gave her a half-smile. Class of 2003. Honors in Political Science. She nodded slowly, printing me a blank badge. No year, no title, no gold leaf. Just Garrett Moore typed in all caps like a clerical error. I walked into the ballroom under a chandelier I once saw in a defense contractor's gala. The room was full of people I used to beat in debate tournaments. Now they held titles longer than their handshakes. Their name tags gleamed. Mine bent at the corner. I hadn't taken 3 steps before a voice rang out across the microphone. Well, well, Garrett, I almost didn't recognize you in that Navy museum piece." The laugh that followed wasn't just Evelyn's. It belonged to 100 others people who never knew me, but thought they did. Evelyn Moore, my sister, my judge, my rival, my family's shining star. I didn't flinch. I simply nodded. Took my place near the back, folding chair, half view of the screen, right between the buffet and the service hallway. No one asked what I'd been doing for the past 20 years. No one knew the message tucked in my clutch was coded clearance from the Strategic Operations Command. No one noticed when my fingers tightened at the word failure whispered 2 tables over. But they would. When the sky split open, they would. The chair creaked when I sat down. A folding rental, no cushion parked so close to the buffet table I could smell the shrimp cocktail. Everyone else had linen-draped seats arranged around monogrammed centerpieces and little gold place cards. Mine was labeled with a Sharpie. Slanted smudged like someone forgot I existed until the last minute. I kept my back straight. A waiter paused beside me, unsure whether to offer me a glass of the sparkling rose everyone else seemed to have. I didn't reach for one. He moved on. From the stage, Evelyn was in her element Pearl's posture power. "It's incredible to see how far we've all come," she said, letting her voice swell with practiced gratitude. "We have senators in this room, CEOs, global researchers, and even a few war heroes." The last line was meant to sting, and it landed. The crowd chuckled on cue. A man leaned toward the woman beside him. "Wasn't Garrett in the military?" Like briefly, she replied without looking at me. "Dropped out of law school and disappeared, I think." "Didn't she end up somewhere in Nevada?" I turned my head slightly, just enough to study their profiles. Not out of anger, out of curiosity. What stories had Evelyn built in my absence? What version of me had she handed out like party favors over the years? And what did it cost her to erase the truth? Lucas Hart approached with a tumbler in hand. Same self-satisfied tilt of the chin he had back in senior year. "Garrett Moore," he said with mock ceremony. "Still brooding, or did you finally switch careers? I heard something about inventory control. Base kitchens." Maybe I looked at him, just looked. That used to be enough to silence a room, not anymore. Evelyn joined him moments later, her smile taut and calculated. "We really should catch up sometime. I'm sure you've seen some interesting things." She emphasized interesting, like it meant pathetic. I didn't respond. Not because I couldn't, but because I'd learned long ago that silence can say more than rebuttals. I had briefed generals while aircraft circled overhead. I'd written letters to families whose sons wouldn't come home. But apparently, none of that compared to Evelyn's podcast or Lucas's startup exit. They didn't see me. Not really. They saw what Evelyn painted for them, a sister who walked away, who never quite measured up, who showed up tonight like a relic. I shifted my gaze toward the ballroom doors, wondering how long it would take before the signal came through. The mission was already in motion. The protocol had activated. I had exactly 44 hours left to stop a breach that could compromise half the Western grid, but all they saw was a woman in a wrinkled dress and old boots. Good. I always preferred working from the shadows. The ballroom was overheating. Or maybe it was just me. I excused myself through a side hallway slipping past the coat check and into a narrow balcony that overlooked the hotel's golf course. The cool air hit my skin like truth. Quiet, still, and sharp. I leaned on the stone railing, hands steady even as my pulse picked up. Then it came, a silent vibration in the lining of my clutch. I opened it with one practiced motion. The screen blinked once. Sauk E5. The message was brief. Intercept confirmed. Proceed. Window 43. 12. The Merlin protocol was active. I closed the device and stared into the night. They thought I'd vanished after law school. They whispered that I couldn't handle the pressure that I broke. The truth was simpler and far more dangerous. I was recruited into strategic operations the week I withdrew. I signed clearance that erased me from public databases, family contacts, alumni rolls. I'd been living in the seams of national security ever since. 3 years embedded in Eurasia, 2 in South Africa under a civilian facade, and the last 18 months buried deep in WDA Cyber Command tracking breach points so classified I couldn't say my own name in certain rooms. I hadn't disappeared. I had simply stopped explaining myself. Behind me, the ballroom pulsed with music and synthetic laughter. I could hear Evelyn's voice again, amplified through the sound system, introducing someone who had developed drone delivery routes for disaster zones. The crowd applauded. I once ran an aerial evac in Kandahar with no SAT coverage and a 37% success projection. We got everyone out. There were no toasts that night. I stepped back inside just as Melissa Quinn caught my eye. She was one of the few faces that hadn't aged into smugness. She walked up beside me at the drink station and spoke without turning. "You look better than they do." I smiled faintly. "They'd disagree." She shrugged. "Truth doesn't need a vote." I didn't know if Melissa remembered what I used to be, but she saw something tonight even if she couldn't name it. That was more than I got from Evelyn in 20 years. Back at my seat, I sipped water and waited. Waited for the next alert, for the next move. Lucas strolled past again, loosening his tie. "Didn't think you'd show. Evelyn said you were off the grid. She says a lot of things." "Yeah," he chuckled. "Like how you used to be the smart one. Guess life's funny, huh?" I didn't answer. The ballroom lights flickered once, just a glitch probably, or maybe the system had already begun to strain. Somewhere a digital thread was being pulled, somewhere something was coming loose, and I was the only one in the room who knew it. The first time I realized Evelyn had erased me, it wasn't through confrontation. It was through absence. 3 years ago, I received a digital copy of the university's alumni honors list. I wasn't on it. That might seem trivial, but I'd been inducted the year after graduation, nominated by faculty, confirmed by record. It was institutional, permanent, or so I thought. I made one discreet call through a secure channel to an academic liaison I trusted. After some hesitation, she told me the request to remove my name came from a verified family contact citing privacy and ongoing security risks. That contact was Evelyn. I said nothing, not even then. I'd been trained not to react especially to sabotage dressed as concern. Later I found out she had also blocked my Medal of Valor nomination, claimed I declined it. Used her DOJ credentials to flag my file citing emotional fatigue, family trauma, and a preference for anonymity. I never wrote that memo, but she had access. I'd listed her as my emergency contact once before I knew better. I remembered the wording clearly. Subject wishes to serve without public record. Request honor be deferred indefinitely. Deferred. That was a pretty way of saying disappeared. Lucas had moved on to hitting on the head of marketing from his old dorm. I watched him from my table, his laugh too loud, his hands too familiar. It struck me how easily men like him aged into success. No need to rewrite their sister's records to feel tall. Melissa approached again this time with a small folder tucked under her arm. "I wasn't sure," she said, glancing around. "But when you walked in, I figured you should have this." She slipped it onto my table. Inside were 3 printed pages, my original commendation letter, the redacted award memo, and an internal email chain forwarded anonymously, all traced back to Evelyn. Melissa met my eyes. "She didn't just rewrite your name. She buried your legacy." I nodded once. No emotion, just confirmation. Then she added, "And she's trying to do it again. She's leading the alumni committee that's voting on next month's honor roll." It made sense. Evelyn had always needed to be the brightest star in every room, and for her to shine, someone else had to vanish. This wasn't about pride. It wasn't about medals. It was about presence. She wanted mine gone, and for a while she succeeded. For years I let her dictate what the family saw, what the school remembered, what the world assumed. I stayed out of the light. I told myself it was strategic, that invisibility was power. But tonight wasn't strategy. Tonight was convergence. My phone buzzed again. SOKE5. Extract ETA 11:00 p.m. Confirm readiness. I closed the folder and tucked it into my coat. The countdown had started, and so had my reappearance. The ballroom lights dimmed just past 10. A slideshow of old yearbook photos played on the big screen, awkward braces, overexposed haircuts, Letterman jackets with too many patches. People clapped at their own faces. Lucas raised a toast to Evelyn, calling her our iron strategist. Someone joked about real heroes and pointed toward a senator sitting near the front. Another said something about unless you're peeling potatoes on a base somewhere in Kansas. I didn't move. Melissa caught my eye across the room. Her expression had shifted. Not sympathy, not pity, something more alert. She had sensed it too, that this night was cracking open. The microphone picked up again. Evelyn returned to the stage, her scarlet dress gleaming beneath the spotlights. Her voice rang clear. I just want to thank my sister Garrett, she said, for always being uniquely herself. The pause that followed was calculated. The audience chuckled, polite but pointed. She may not be on social media or in the headlines, but she's always marching to her own, very specific drum. More laughter. I didn't smile. She continued. And not everyone is meant for the spotlight. Some people do their best work far from it. I stood. No one noticed at first. I walked calmly toward the exit doors, heels silent on the plush carpet. Evelyn's voice blurred behind me, swallowed by applause and clinking glasses. Outside, the wind was sharper now, cutting through the stillness like a blade. I looked up, not for clarity, but for confirmation. The night sky flickered once. Then it came a low, mechanical growl that deepened as it approached. Guests inside began to stir. Napkins fluttered, glasses trembled, a chandelier hummed, and then the sky broke open. A black military helicopter sliced down through the treetops' rotors, sending leaves and wine menus flying across the lawn. People screamed. Someone dropped a tray. A camera flash went off. Evelyn's voice stopped mid-sentence. The chopper steadied just above the lawn, then lowered, controlled, silent, but for the thunder it carried. When it touched down, a single figure stepped out. Colonel Nathan Greer. Dress blues, impeccable posture, eyes forward. He crossed the lawn without acknowledging a soul. Not the senators, not the CEOs, not Evelyn, who had stumbled from the ballroom steps in shock. He stopped 3 feet in front of me, saluted clean. Lieutenant General Garrett Moore, he said loud enough for every frozen mouth to hear. Ma'am, Strategic Operations Command requests your immediate presence. Priority 1. I returned the salute. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Phones lifted. Flashbulbs went off like fireworks. Lucas stared, drink forgotten. Evelyn stood barefoot, one heel missing clutch, trembling in her hand. She didn't speak. Neither did I. I just stepped toward the open door of the helicopter wind at my back, the stars clear above me for the first time in years. And without turning, I left them all behind. The extraction was clean. 6 minutes from lawn to airspace. We cleared the ridge before the guests even returned to their seats. Inside the cabin, Greer handed me a file. My fingerprints unlocked it. The mission was already moving. Cyber breach intercept confirmed in Prague. But the real storm wouldn't come from the grid. It would come from the press. By morning, my inbox was an inferno. Media requests, tagged photos, even a late-night talk show clip titled, "The Woman Who Walked Out Then Flew Off." They called me a ghost, a myth, a PR plant. Others accused me of staging it all, military cosplay and heels. Evelyn's podcast dropped less than 12 hours later. Episode 200. My sister the General. She called me a narcissist in uniform. Said I weaponized rank for drama, reappearing after years of silence just to steal her moment. You don't get to vanish for 2 decades, she said, and then land a helicopter on someone else's story. The Strategic Operations PR officer called within the hour. You're trending, ma'am. And not the good kind. I said nothing. You don't have the luxury of silence anymore, he added. They're connecting you to Merlin Protocol. That makes this battlefield not family. Melissa arrived the next day, folder in hand. She said nothing at first, just placed it on my desk and stepped back. Inside were the sealed Medal of Valor documents from 2018, buried, blocked. The final authorization signature, Evelyn Moore. She'd used her clearance at the DOJ to intercept my nomination packet, submitted a false request to archive the process under emotional withdrawal from service. She even flagged the presentation memo as potentially re-traumatizing. She didn't just hide my record, she wrote me out of it. Melissa's voice was quiet. She erased your name before the medal could find it. The final page in the folder hit harder. An internal university memo. Evelyn had advised the alumni board to remove my name from consideration for the legacy honor roll, claimed I politely declined recognition, and was no longer engaged with the institution. No one questioned her. No one ever did. Until now. The following weekend, the university hosted its annual alumni recognition event. Evelyn stood on stage in pearls and a navy silk blazer, delivering a keynote titled, "Legacy is Showing Up." Halfway through her second paragraph, the doors opened. I walked in, full uniform, dress boots echoing down the aisle. Gasps followed. Cameras clicked. Eyes widened. The alumni director hesitated, then nodded. I stepped onto the stage, folder in hand. Evelyn froze. "I'm Lieutenant General Garrett Moore," I said, "class of 2003, and I've been here, quietly, constantly, while others rewrote the story." I opened the folder laying out the evidence, redacted memos, commendation files, and a photo of me at SOC command beside General Cade. Silver star visible, name intact. "Some of us lead from the front," I said, "some from the silence. But we are not invisible." The room didn't erupt. It didn't need to. The silence that followed was heavier than applause. The ceremony took place beneath a white canopy on the south lawn, flags at half-staff wind, steady but gentle. No marching bands, no TV anchors, just officers' quiet reverence and the president's voice over the rustle of uniforms. When the Medal of Valor ribbon was placed around my neck, I didn't smile. Not because I wasn't honored, but because I knew what it had cost to get here. I stood straight, chin level, every thread on my dress blues, pressed with precision. It wasn't pride that held me upright. It was memory of the ones who didn't come back, of the nights, without sleep, of the quiet missions no one would ever read about. Somewhere in the third row, Melissa sat in a navy dress, hands folded. Beside her, Evelyn. No pearls this time. No makeup. Just a program in her lap, and a gaze she didn't look away from. For the first time, she didn't try to perform. She simply stayed present. After the ceremony, I declined the West Wing office they offered. "I've spent enough time underground," I told the chief of staff. But the spotlight was never mine to keep. Instead, I asked for a teaching position. Not at a university, at Garrison Vale Academy, where cadets trained before they earned bars or titles. I wanted to meet them before the world taught them to hide who they were. In my first week, a cadet asked, "Ma'am, what do you do when the system forgets your name?" I paused, then answered, "You lead anyway, and you document everything." They laughed, but I could see they understood. That fall, I posted a quote on the lecture hall wall, one I'd once whispered to myself on nights when I felt invisible. "You do not need applause to exist. You just need to keep standing when no one's watching." And they did. So did I. Spring returned before she did. I was finishing a seminar on asymmetric threat planning when the knock came. Outside my office stood Evelyn, no heels, no camera crew, just a gray coat too big for her shoulders and a worn leather satchel at her side. She didn't ask to come in. She waited. "I didn't know how to stand next to you," she said, "so I tried to erase you." I didn't respond, but I didn't shut the door either. Over the next few months, she showed up not with apologies, but with effort. She volunteered at cadet events, quiet, efficient. She never asked to speak. She just listened. One afternoon, she handed me a slim binder. "I wrote this," she said, awkward, "for the ones who don't know how to say what they know. Might help them stand a little straighter." It was a guide for new recruits, how to brief with clarity, how to navigate scrutiny without folding. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. That spring, the Academy unveiled a bronze plaque just outside the West Hall. Garrett Moore, integrity and silence. No rank, no title. Just a name that had once been removed and now could no longer be ignored. I stood beside Evelyn as cadets filed past. One of them, barely 20, paused and said, "Ma'am, you're the reason I stayed." I didn't reply, just placed a hand on her shoulder and nodded. That evening, I sat alone by the practice field, watching dusk settle like a secret. The sky was quiet, no helicopters, no flashbulbs, just the steady hush of wind through trees. And I remembered the years they called me a failure. Not because I had failed, but because I had done something they couldn't measure. Now I didn't need to be measured. I had already become the thing they forgot to count.